Hey everyone, just a heads up that I will be quoting someone who uses the F word between minute 18 and 19, if anyone has sensitive ears. Tonight's episode is about television and the home run race between Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. But I'm going to begin with the story of an Australian woman made famous by the line, "The dingo took my baby." Now, how in the heck am I going to connect these two stories? Well, let's see. In 1980, an Australian woman named Lindy Chamberlain Creighton was camping with her family near Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock. It's that giant rock in the middle of Australia. And they were camping when her 9-week-old daughter went missing. Chamberlain Creighton swore that a dingo took her baby, but no one believed her. And at a trial 2 years later, she was found guilty of killing her daughter. Eventually, though, the evidence stacked up to corroborate her theory that, in fact, a dingo walked into her tent, stole, and killed her baby. From the start, when Chamberlain Creighton was saying, "The dingo stole my baby," no one believed her. The press didn't believe her, and so the people didn't believe her. And once the truth came out, it was hard to change their minds. This is what happened to Roger Maris in 1961. Many people, the press, people in high positions in baseball, built up a stack of lies and turned Maris into something he wasn't. And these lies from 60 years ago are still warping Maris's legacy today. It happened because of circumstance, because of history, because of the press, and because of a fairly new technology called television. Tonight, I'll tell the story of one of the most memorable home run races in baseball history, and how a deeply flawed man became a savior to millions, while a quiet, decent man who just wanted to be left alone became one of the biggest villains of Major League Baseball. From historic milestones to euphoric moments shared by millions.
In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened.
To the simple banter that brought us together. Welcome to the Midnight Library of Baseball, Season 4, the broadcast that raised us, from radio to television and beyond. I'm Ben Orlando. In 1960, Roger Maris won the American League MVP award. In 1961, he won the MVP again. More importantly, he also broke the most hallowed record in baseball, smashing 61 home runs to best the game's greatest legend, Babe Ruth. In terms of legacy, Maris actually held the record longer than Ruth. He held it 37 years compared to Ruth's 34. And the person who eventually broke Maris's record had the advantage of steroids. Maris is one of the most famous players in baseball history, and yet he's not in the Hall of Fame. Why not? Maris's career numbers are good, not great, and yet other players with lesser numbers, less famous, are in the Hall of Fame, while Maris is not. Why? To answer this question, we have to understand what happened in 1961 with Roger Maris. And really, we need to understand what happened to baseball leading up to this time. For the major leagues, it was like a massive earthquake that hadn't struck in the history of the game. Because in the 1950s, you had new franchises, relocations of established teams that hadn't happened for 50 years. The Boston Braves moved to Milwaukee in 1953. St. Louis Browns moved to Baltimore in 1954. The Athletics moved to Kansas City. The Dodgers moved to Los Angeles, and the Giants moved to San Francisco. And the Senators moved to Minneapolis. No baseball moves had occurred since 1903. In many cases, like with Milwaukee, the moves led to massive attendance boosts. But the relocations overall highlighted the problems in Major League Baseball. People were moving out of the cities and into the suburbs, while many Major League parks were stuck in the cities, making it hard to commute with limited parking. You had a growing diversity of sports and entertainment options. Not only could you now get a front row seat to a ball game from the comfort of your living room, but you could watch other sports and TV shows, movies. If Major League Baseball was doing anything wrong, it was the lag in switching over to night games. Throughout the 50s, day games still far outnumbered night games. The more night games teams offered, the greater attendance they'd get. So at this point, baseball is looking for a savior, just like it did after the Black Sox scandal of 1919, when it did find a savior in Babe Ruth. Now, with declining attendance and more entertainment options than ever before, the MLB needed rescuing. And they found their saviors in Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. In his book, Broadcasting Baseball, author Eldon Ham describes the significance of the 1961 home run race. He writes, quote, "There are 2 years in baseball lore that simply stand on their own with no introduction, a phenomenon only found in the history of Major League Baseball and no other American team sport. Those years were 1927 and 1961, end quote. Now, on the surface, this seems like a two-way race between Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. But it was actually a three-way race, with the ghost of Babe Ruth weighing in heavily. When you know the context, the pressure, and the hate, it's pretty astounding that Maris did what he did. In the midst of the home run race in 1961, Maris was so stressed that his hair was falling out in clumps. Part of the problem was New York. By the start of 1961, Mickey Mantle was the darling of the city, of the country. But it didn't start that way. New York is harsh on its players. According to a young reporter of the time, George Vesey, quote, "The fans had finally taken to Mantle after booing his butt for 5, 6, 7 years. By 1960, he was a myth," end quote. And for good reason. By 1961, Mantle had led the league in WAR 5 times. He led the league in runs 5 times, home runs 4 times. He was league MVP twice, All-Star 9 times, and in 1956 he won the Triple Crown, leading the league that year in batting average, home runs, RBIs, runs scored, WAR, slugging percentage, OPS, and total bases. For years, Mantle was one of the best players in the league, and yet it still took years for Yankees fans to warm up to him. So, what chance did Roger Maris have? Going into 1961, Mantle had the full support of New York City and the country. He'd also come up through the Yankee farm system. He'd never played with another team. To fans, to teammates, and the Yankee organization, Mickey Mantle was a true, loyal Yankee who'd proved himself through and through. And if anyone were going to break the hallowed record of Babe Ruth, it should be this native son. Certainly not some outsider from the Midwest. But who was this guy, Roger Maris? Maris grew up in a small town in North Dakota. He was a quiet, introverted kid, but he was a pure athlete. Playing football for his high school team, Maris once ran back 4 kickoff returns for touchdowns in a single game. He also married his high school sweetheart. He could have played football, but decided to sign with the Cleveland Indians. He played for Cleveland and the Kansas City Athletics before being traded to the Yankees in 1960. Maris had a pretty quick start, hitting 28 home runs at his second season. Then he only hit 16 in 1959. But the Yankees saw his potential and signed him in 1960. And almost immediately, he exploded. That season, he hit 39 home runs and led the league in RBIs with 112. He also led the league in WAR and won the MVP award. For someone like Maris, the success that first year in New York would have been a blessing and a curse. Because better performance means more press, more cameras and microphones and reporters in your face. And this is not what Maris wanted. I think he would have done well in the 1920s, where there was more respect between reporters and players. Maris could have emphasized his desire to be left alone, and to a degree, his wishes would have been respected. Look at Lou Gehrig. But in the 1960s, the relationship between players and the press was different. And as 1961 rolled around, Maris didn't make it any easier on himself. He was stubborn. He was a small-town guy who liked what he liked and believed what he believed. When a friend of the Yankees, Julius Isaacson, picked up Roger Maris from the airport in 1960, he noticed what Maris was wearing. Casual jeans, a polo shirt, and casual shoes. Isaacson told him, quote, "Kid, you can't dress like that. This is the Yankees," end quote. To which Maris replied, quote, "If they don't like it, they can send me back," end quote. Isaacson actually became Maris's best friend. And later he said that if you knew Maris, you loved him, but you had to understand him first. And most people didn't take the time. In retrospect, of all the major league clubs, the Yankees were probably the worst for Maris's mental health. In fact, he'd find peace in a fan base who loved him and supported him years later in St. Louis. But for now, in 1960, it was the Big Apple and a press that would hound a guy who just wanted to be left alone. Before the 1961 season, Mantle and Maris made headlines in 1960 with their first home run race. Back and forth they went, with Maris topping out at 39 and Mantle winning the contest with 40, which was enough for the American League title. But we have to take a step back for a second to look at the big picture, which is ridiculous. Because that season, 1960, the Yankees won the American League pennant for the 10th time in 12 years. And in this World Series in 1960 against the Pittsburgh Pirates, it was one of the most dramatic ever. And it helped remind people, hey, this is what baseball can be. The series was dripping with tension, especially Game 7, which was seen by millions of people on television. Game 7 was tied 9-9 in the ninth inning when Pirates star Bill Mazeroski stepped up to the plate and smashed one of the most famous home runs in postseason history.
Art Ditbar throws. Here's a swing and a high fly ball going deep left. If they do it, back to the wall goes Berra. It is home run. The Pirates win.
And just take note of this name, Bill Mazeroski, because he's going to be important later on. But this is the scene going into 1961. Both Maris and Mantle, New York Yankees, put up huge numbers. They were power hitters, and what could they do in 1961? But by this point, Mantle is the golden son, and Maris is the outsider. Maris doesn't deserve to win. He and Mantle are depicted as mortal enemies, and the press won't leave him alone. And worse yet, reports come to light that make it seem like Roger Maris is cheating. So the cards are heavily stacked against Roger Maris. It's a wonder he finished the season at all, let alone broke the biggest record in the history of the game. This factor of the ghost of Babe Ruth is a big one, because it hasn't been that long since Babe Ruth's death in 1948. Many people who knew Ruth, who loved him, are still alive, and they don't want that record to be broken, especially not by an outsider, a newbie who just arrived with the Yankees. For many fans and people in baseball, there was this unconscious belief that before you break such a major record, you have to establish yourself. You have to ingrain yourself in the team and the community around you for years. That's what Babe Ruth did. That's what Mickey Mantle did. And because Mantle was ingrained, he could now let his southern aw-shucks personality shine through. He was comfortably easing into the throne set up for him, while Roger Maris squirmed from the attention and the unfairness. What I mean by unfairness is how Maris's teammates were treated. Teammates like Elston Howard, who hit .348 that year, or pitcher Whitey Ford, who won 25 games. But the press looked right through these budding achievements to Maris and Mantle. And then when Mantle got hurt late in the season, it was all Roger Maris all the time. This was a double whammy because Maris was exhausted from talking to the press, and he was angry that they were ignoring these amazing accomplishments by his teammates, whom he respected. Hall of Fame sports writer Jack Lang remembered the absurdity of that time. From Lang, quote, "Remember, this was a team going for the championship, and every day our stories were about Maris. It's the only time I remember in 50 years where I spent an entire month writing about one player." End quote. It wasn't just the repetitive questions, it was the duration of them. According to Yankee manager Ralph Houck, the number of reporters in the clubhouse was staggering. 50, 60 members of the press crammed in, all surrounding Maris. Can you imagine walking to your car after work and suddenly 60 people are cramming their microphones in your face? From teammate Bob Serve, quote, "When he'd get to the park, people would be there waiting to bug him. After the game, if we were done at 4, he'd be there at 6, still answering questions. I know because I had to wait for him. It would be the same thing over and over. Are you going to hit one tomorrow?" End quote. Now, any one of us faced with this incessant onslaught day after day is probably going to pop off at some point. And unfortunately, this happened to Maris one day when a reporter named Joe Trimble asked him, again, "Do you think you'll break Babe Ruth's home run record?" Maris replied, quote, "How the fuck should I know?" End quote. This is the thing. People watching on television, people reading the newspapers and magazines are not going to think about the hundreds of thousands of times Maris has been asked this question. They're not going to consider the reporters pushing in on Maris in the locker room so much that he can't breathe, so that he doesn't have any space of his own. They're not going to consider Maris's quiet, inward personality. They're only going to see this response, "How the fuck should I know?" And they're going to label him a crank, an ungrateful jerk, a man not worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as Mickey Mantle or Babe Ruth. And this contrast was apparent to millions of people watching on television. According to writer Eldon Ham, regarding the contrasting personalities of Mantle and Maris, quote, "Mantle was glib, good-looking, and carried a boyish charm that played well on television. But Maris's personality ranged from boring to stubborn to hostile." End quote. And here's something I found really interesting in Eldon Ham's book, Broadcasting Baseball. When he's talking about Mantle and Maris, he compares Mantle and Maris to Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy in terms of how television launched one man and ruined another. In the 1960 televised debate for the presidency, according to Ham, quote, Nixon had a dark complexion and a non-engaging personality, and he appeared nervous on television. With a 5 o'clock shadow, sweaty brow, and shifty demeanor, Nixon was a profound contrast to the youthful, sunny, glib, and good-looking John F. Kennedy. End quote. Even worse, during this first debate in 1960, Nixon had been sick. He looked pale, but he refused to wear makeup. He didn't understand what television was going to do. And this is fascinating. According to a survey of the time, people who only heard the debate on the radio thought Nixon had won. But people who only watched the debate on television thought Kennedy had won. From Eldon Ham, quote, did the same phenomenon influence the perception of Maris in the context of baseball history? It almost certainly did. Maris won on the facts, 61 homers, but Mantle won the battle of posterity, a beloved icon enshrined in Cooperstown along with Ruth, leaving Maris as the odd man out, end quote. Now, here Ham says that Maris won on the facts, that he hit 61 home runs. But remember from our episode with Shoeless Joe Jackson, numbers can lie. They can be tweaked and reshaped. And that's what happened when Commissioner of Baseball Ford Frick opened his mouth on July 18, 1961. What Frick said was that because they'd expanded the number of games to 162 that year, from 154, Maris and Mantle would have to break the record by 154 games. Otherwise, the new mark, according to Frick, quote, will not be the official record, end quote. But Ford Frick and others were leaving out a key part of this announcement. Can you imagine being Roger Maris, taking flack from the press all year, never being left alone, being criticized for not living up to the standards of Ruth or his teammate Mickey Mantle? He's just trying to play baseball. He's getting closer and closer. And even before Frick's statement, things were bad. Sports writer Shirley Povich captures the tension when she wrote, quote, Maris had already received punishment enough, even before Frick's ruling. In almost every ballpark, fans rooted for Mickey Mantle to win the home run race. From the stands, Maris heard words like, you'll choke. He could also read that Rogers Hornsby said, it will be unfortunate if Ruth's record is broken by a 270 hitter, end quote. And just to reiterate here, Rogers Hornsby is one of the greatest players who ever lived, playing in the 20s and 30s. And here's this legend saying, it would be a shame, basically, if Roger Maris broke the record. So this was all happening before Ford Frick made his statement, saying, if you don't break the record by 154 games, it really won't count. But what people didn't know was that behind Ford Frick's statement, there was a huge conflict of interest, which we'll get to after the break. If you're looking for more material seen through the Midnight Library lens, I have 15 episodes that will never be heard on the regular feed. This is several hours of additional content, along with hours of interviews. The latest Extra Innings episode focuses on an early Major League player, Napoleon Lajoie, credited by some as the first true baseball superstar. And for good reason. You can find this on Patreon/Midnight Library of Baseball. Also, if you like the show, please write a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen. I'm trying to find a podcast home, and the more reviews I have, the more likely I'll find a good fit for the Midnight Library of Baseball. For those of you who've written reviews or donated at midnightlibraryofbaseball.com, I really appreciate your support. Okay, back to the show. In July 1961, baseball commissioner Ford Frick made a statement saying that if the home run record was not broken in 154 games, it would be basically invalidated. It would not count. And for the millions of Americans who read or heard this statement, they would have thought, well, this must be true. This is the baseball commissioner. He's professional. He's unbiased. But this was far from the truth. Long before Ford Frick became baseball commissioner, he was a sports writer in the 1920s who covered Babe Ruth. Not only that, but Frick and Ruth were the best of friends. Frick was Ruth's ghostwriter for years. And when Babe Ruth was dying of cancer in the hospital, only a few close friends and family were allowed to see him, and Frick was one of them. So this man who covered Babe Ruth, who adored Babe Ruth, becomes commissioner of baseball, and suddenly, someone comes along who might break his friend's record. How unfair is this? But this is what happened, and it would ratchet up the pressure for Roger Maris. Another unfortunate aspect of the story is that while Maris, a good, loyal teammate and husband, is being shoved into the template of the villain, the other two participants of this home run race have their flaws ignored by the public and press. Over time, the public came to adore Babe Ruth. He was a blowhard. He was arrogant, stubborn, crude, and immature. But all of these traits were seen as endearing. And what about the kind, friendly golden boy, Mickey Mantle? He was also seen as a good guy with a winning smile. But what was the truth? In 1952, near the start of his career, Mantle's father died, and according to Mantle, this is when he began to use alcohol as a crutch. Mantle began many of his mornings with what he called the breakfast of champions, a big glass of brandy, Kahlua, and cream. On days he wasn't playing, Mantle admitted to having 3 or 4 bottles of wine. He'd go out on benders with teammate Billy Martin, taking all kinds of insane risks that probably should have gotten him killed. One night, for example, Mantle and Martin climbed out, drunk, onto the ledge of their hotel. Their plan was to go spy on some of their teammates, but as they edged around the building, all the lights were off, and the ledge was too narrow to walk backwards, so they had to walk all the way around the building back to their rooms, 22 stories up. Mantle also suffered a slew of injuries, no doubt exacerbated by the drinking and resulting mishaps. In fact, Mantle believed that the alcohol cut his career short. But this wasn't discussed at the time. And he, like Maris, married his high school sweetheart, but he, unlike Maris, was unfaithful again and again and again. Many sources point to not only Mantle's golden depiction by the press, but also the hostility and rivalry between himself and Maris. By pitting Mantle and Maris against each other, it would have heightened the drama of the home run race, but it also would have created more allies for Mantle and more enemies for Maris. In reality, this depiction couldn't have been further from the truth. In fact, according to Julius Isaacson, Roger Maris saved Mickey Mantle's life. Here's how Isaacson tells the story. Quote, Mickey was living at the St. Moritz Hotel in Manhattan, and one day he got so drunk, a friend of mine who owned the bar called me. I went and got Mickey, and we convinced him to live with Roger. Otherwise, Mickey went strictly from one bar to another. End quote. So Mantle and Maris were actually roommates and close friends who cheered each other on throughout the season. And Maris, more of a homebody, helped Mantle stay out of trouble. In his 1985 biography, Mickey Mantle wrote this about his relationship with Maris. Quote, "Through it all, we remained close. There was never any jealousy. I rooted for him and definitely rooted for myself. Besides, with Roger hitting good, it made me try harder. So if there was a rivalry, it was a friendly one." End quote. Game after game, as Roger Maris is losing his patience and losing his hair, America sees him. They see a sullen, angry, depressed man. And while they're watching, they're thinking, what's wrong with this guy? What's his problem? Can he appreciate what he's got, what he might achieve? I mean, talk about someone not deserving to break Babe Ruth's record. What a shame. Of all the players, it had to be this guy. It had to be Roger Maris. The insults, the undermining, the pressure ramped up so much that Maris wanted to take a break. Just let that sink in for a second. Here's this home run race. He's trying to break an all-time record. And despite everything that's happening, Maris does want to break the record. But he also wants to sit out a game. And not just any game. This is game 154. There are 9 games left and Maris has 58 home runs. Every at-bat is precious, and he wants to sit. According to writer Larry Stone, quote, "He approached Houck nearly in tears and stunned the manager by asking for the day off." End quote. But Houck convinced Maris to play, and during that game, Maris hit his 59th home run. With 4 games left to play, Maris hit home run number 60, tying Ruth's record. And then, stunningly again, he asked Houck to sit out the next game. And this time Houck agrees. So Maris misses one of the 4 final games. And then, in the final game of the season, Maris did it. Here's Phil Rizzuto calling the play.
Number 61. Here's the windup. Fastball hit deep to right. This could be it. Way back there. Holy cow! It's Holy cow! What a shot!
Now, here's one of the greatest paradoxes of this whole story. Yankee Stadium had a seating capacity of more than 67,000 people. At this final game of the season, with the promise of a historic milestone, with Roger Maris's last chance to break the single-season home run record set 34 years earlier, a mere 23,154 fans showed up. Why so small? Well, for one, Mickey Mantle was no longer in the hunt. And because the press had vilified Maris, people weren't interested in seeing him. Plus, it didn't really count, did it? Because he had more games than Ruth to break the record. That comment from Frick, even after he tried to backpedal, torpedoed what could have been a wonderful, feel-good narrative. Even the Yankees didn't really support Maris. According to ESPN writer Rick Acacella, quote, "The modest attendance was attributable to the slighted significance given to the feat by Frick's ruling and by Yankee management's unwillingness to hype the event." End quote. But something happened during this moment that exemplified Maris's character. The person who caught the 61st home run would receive $5,000. It had been promoted that way, people knew. But when the man caught the ball and knew about the reward, which would be more than $50,000 today, he still offered the ball to Maris. But Maris waved the guy off. "You keep it," he told the guy. "Take the reward. I don't want it." That's Roger Maris. Now, I just want to take a moment to go back to this claim by Commissioner Ford Frick that because Roger Maris played 8 more games than Babe Ruth, his feat was tainted. Because when you look at the details, and I love combing through the details, you find something very telling. It is true that Maris had a 162-game season, and of those 162 games, he played 161 of them. Babe Ruth had a 154-game season, and he played 151 of those games. That's what most people saw. That's what most people knew. But, Maris had a total of 698 plate appearances, while Babe Ruth had a total of 691. That's only 7 fewer plate appearances. Now, if you imagine each player averages 4 at-bats per game, if Babe Ruth plays all 154 games that year, and Roger Maris plays all 162 games, Maris ends the season with 702 at-bats, and Ruth ends the season with 703 at-bats. 1 more at-bat than Roger Maris. This is all to say that they were very close in the number of opportunities each man had, regardless of the number of games. This fact was overlooked. But was it really overlooked, or intentionally ignored? According to many sources, Maris's relationship with the press got even worse the season after his record-breaking year. In the minds and hearts of the press, he was uncooperative and hostile. But what did Roger Maris do in 1961? He won the MVP for a second year in a row. He won the Hickok Belt as the best professional athlete of the year. He was voted Sports Magazine's Man of the Year, the Sporting News Player of the Year, the Associated Press Male Athlete of the Year, and Sports Illustrated's Sportsman of the Year. But Roger Maris was never admitted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. According to sports writer Harold Friend, it was because the press couldn't accept that Roger Maris was simply Roger Maris. From Friend, quote, "When he first arrived in New York, the Big Apple, the greatest city in the world, the home of arrogance, pride, and pomposity, the young man from Hibbing, Minnesota, was wearing a sports shirt and blue jeans. He was immediately told to dress properly." End quote. Friend continues, quote, "The media found it difficult to reconcile the fact that Maris was rich and a world-famous personality who could build a mansion for his family, take them on a world tour, or buy fancy cars, but didn't. The baseball writers blamed Maris for being a shy, reticent, modest individual. But that was Roger Maris." End quote. So, was Harold Friend wrong? Was Roger Maris legitimately excluded from the Hall of Fame? Well, author Eldon Ham makes a great argument for Friend's case when he compares the careers of Roger Maris and Pirates star Bill Mazeroski. Remember, it was Mazeroski who hit the epic home run in Game 7 of the 1960 World Series to win it for the Pirates. And Mazeroski was elected to the Hall of Fame. But first, how does a player get into the Hall of Fame? So, 5 years after retiring, a player can be put on the ballot by the Baseball Writers Association of America. If he gets on the ballot, he needs 75% of the votes to make it into Cooperstown. If he doesn't get 75%, he can stay on the ballot for 15 years. After that point, he has to wait another 5 years to be eligible for the Golden Era Committee, which is made up of Hall of Fame members, baseball executives, and writers. And again, he needs 75%. Remember, this Golden Era Committee is how Chuck Klein got in years after his eligibility expired, thanks to the help of Richard Nixon, who also made a cameo in this episode. Okay, so this Golden Committee is how Bill Mazeroski got in 2001. But let's look at the numbers. Mazeroski played 17 seasons, while Maris played only 12. But in his 12 seasons, Maris nearly equaled Mazeroski for RBIs, with 851 compared to Mazeroski's 853. Their career batting averages were identical at 260. Maris's on-base percentage was 345 compared to Mazeroski's 299. And Maris's slugging percentage was 476 compared to Mazeroski's 367. And, oh, by the way, Maris hit 275 home runs compared to Mazeroski's 138. In fact, in that one season, 1961, Maris hit nearly half of Mazeroski's career total. Roger Maris appeared in 7 World Series, winning 3 of them, 2 for the Yankees and 1 for the Cardinals, while Mazeroski won 2 with the Pirates. According to Eldon Ham, quote, Bill Mazeroski clubbed 1 spectacular home run in 1960 after hitting an unremarkable 11 home runs during the regular season. But Maris slugged an entire miracle season in 1961. End quote. To continue with this debate for a moment, during my research, I stumbled upon 2 very compelling articles by journalist Steve Buttrey, who doesn't so much use statistics to argue why Roger Maris belongs in the Hall of Fame. Instead, he says plainly, Roger Maris was famous. Quote, if that museum in Cooperstown were the Hall of Longevity or the Hall of High Batting Averages, then fine, leave Maris out. Those are the only 2 legitimate knocks against him. But it's the Hall of Fame, and Maris is more famous than most of the players there. End quote. Buttrey goes on to point out that Maris broke the most famous record in baseball, and then he held it for 37 years. And when you mention Roger Maris, when you mention 1961, people know what you're talking about. But whether or not he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, there's no question that television ruined Roger Maris in the public eye, just like it did Richard Nixon. A picture says 1,000 words. And for years, when anyone thought of Maris, they'd think of his face on TV. Bitter, tired, angry, hostile. Who would put that guy in Cooperstown? But there's a bright side, because in 1967, Maris was traded from the Yankees to the Cardinals. And finally, in St. Louis, he found a home where he felt he belonged, where the fans welcomed him, and the teammates enjoyed his humble personality and solid work ethic. That year, Maris helped the Cardinals win the World Series. And then the next year, he retired. In 1985, Roger Maris died of lymphoma, a cancer of the lymph glands. He was 51 years old. Roger Maris did everything baseball asked of him. He hit the home runs. He broke the records. He helped his team win pennants and World Series. He tried to be patient, but he couldn't fight a ghost or lies. And on television, he couldn't hide what all the pressure was doing to him. I think the biggest takeaway here, for me, is the consequence of blindly believing what you see or trusting what someone else says because they're an authority. Decades later, people who vote on the Hall of Famers are still influenced by these misperceptions and lies. Maybe if people in 1961 had asked a few more questions, they would have seen the truth. And they would have seen that Roger Maris was a quiet, hard-working, good guy who just wanted to play baseball and help his team. And maybe today, it's time for people to stop punishing him for factors that were completely out of his control. It's time to accept Roger Maris for being Roger Maris, in all of his glory and simplicity. We'll end tonight with another great listener baseball story from the Catch King, John Sukanik.
I had a lady who saw me on the news, and she reached out and said, I don't like baseball. I haven't ever played catch. I had a glove when I was a little girl, maybe, but I certainly don't, but I saw your story and I was moved by it. And there's just something, I can't get it out of my head. I need to play catch with you. And I said, all right, let's meet. And she said, can I borrow a glove? And I said, sure. So we met a couple of days later. And when I get there, she has a glove. And I said, oh, you went and got a glove. And she said, I knew I had one from when I was a little girl. And she said, I went up into the attic and I started looking for it. Took me 2 hours. The last box, I find my glove from when I was 10 years old. And written on the glove in her dad's handwriting was her name and phone number. And she starts getting teary-eyed and she says, my dad passed away a few years ago. She said, so to see this glove, the last time I had this glove, when I was 10, playing with my dad, to see his handwriting on it, she's like, thank you. Like, thank you for that. And we had a great moment, great catch, and we take a picture and off she goes. A couple weeks go by and I get a message from her and she says, I just want to let you know that day changed my life. And I said, how so? And she says, I got home from playing catch with you and I didn't know what to do with the glove, but I knew I didn't want to put it away in a box. So I just set it on the kitchen counter. And she says, I have a 12-year-old son, could care less about baseball, never had a glove, not a baseball kid, just not him. After 2 or 3 days, he says to me, Mom, what's this? And she says, that's my glove when I was a little girl. I used to play catch with your grandpa. And he says, really? Can you and I play catch? And so she said, every day now he comes home from school, the first thing they do is they go out in the yard and play catch together for 5 or 10 minutes. And she just said, thank you for that. It's humbling to be a part of, but here's this lady and she's having these moments with her son that maybe she wouldn't have had if she didn't see some guy on the news that was doing this. And again, every time I sort of doubted that impact, it just happened over and over. I literally have hundreds and hundreds. I keep a journal every day, who I played catch with, where it was, and a couple of notes about the experience. And I go back and look through it all the time. And it's amazing how many moments I've been able to share with people or help facilitate after we played catch.
Thanks again, John, for another great story. Next week, we'll look at some of the greatest broadcasters in baseball history, and one other thing they all had in common, which was they were all fired. Next time on the Midnight Library of Baseball. The show is produced and edited by me, Ben Orlando. Music by Sergi Papkin and Ashot Danielian, and other artists at Pixabay and Artlist.io. Good night.